and welcome to Pharma Television News Review here at Oz Biotech in Melbourne. On this show, I have Deborah Rathjen, who is CEO of a company called Bionomics, but also is chairman of Oz Biotech. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Fintan.
Deborah, as I said, you're the CEO of Bionomics. It's an ASX-listed company. Tell us all about Bionomics. What sort of company are you?
We are an ASX-listed company. Our current market capitalisation is of the order of 90 million. We have 4 clinical trials ongoing in 2 different therapeutic areas. All of these trials will report in the first half of next year. So it's a very exciting time, a very key inflection point for the company in terms of value creation and the execution of our licensing strategy around both of our 2 key assets.
So tell me a little bit more about these 4 clinical trials.
They're very exciting clinical trials. 2 of the trials are phase 2 trials of our anti-cancer agent BNC105. BNC105 is a vascular disrupting agent, and the trials that we have ongoing are in renal cell cancer. That's a multi-centre trial in the US. We also have a multi-centre trial ongoing here in Australia in patients with mesothelioma. The other set of trials are to do with our anxiety compound, BNC210, and those trials have just started in Europe. They've got very interesting clinical settings. They're both phase 1, but they're as close as we can come to doing a phase 2 trial without actually doing one. We expect that those trials will complete this year and will report data early next year.
You've got a partnership with Merck Serono, and that's around what specific compound?
That partnership is around our KV1.3 program. KV1.3 is a novel target for multiple sclerosis and other autoimmune disorders.
Okay, so obviously with so many clinical trials going on, there has to be a reasonable cash consumption for you. Where does that leave your company at the moment in terms of runway to over the next few years in terms of cash consumption?
We currently have about 2 years cash, so we're pretty well placed. We have anticipation of revenue coming in from a number of sources, including the execution of our licensing strategy for BNC210 and BNC105 over the period.
And that partnering strategy is precisely what?
With the BNC210, which is in development for anxiety and depression, we're looking to partner after the completion of the current clinical trials. Obviously, moving into phase 2, we'd be more comfortable with a partner. With BNC105, our strategy is to partner that program once we have phase 2 clinical trial data, and final data from both of the trials we have ongoing should be available in 2012.
Deborah, you've had the role of, and you have the role of chairman of Oz Biotech as well. Looking at the industry, and you're running a business yourself, you've got your hands-on experience of this. How would you describe the current situation for biotech companies here in Australia?
I think the current situation is not without its challenges, but I do certainly think that the industry itself is extremely robust. We are not used to having enormous cash boxes to run our businesses. So the GFC really didn't present that much in terms of an additional concern about raising capital. In fact, last year around 700 million was raised by Australian biotech companies. And in fact, my own company last year raised $19 million. So it's not as gloomy as in other parts of the world. We've still got strong science, we've still got very good management teams, and most companies have been able to weather the storm. Right. So I'm very optimistic about the state of the industry.
But I suppose for company needs to have something in clinical trials to get funded these days. It's much more difficult for early stage companies.
It is more difficult for early stage companies, but I think that also investors are returning to invest in platform plays. So in addition to seeing compounds in the clinic and validation through licensing deals, investors are becoming more attuned to having platform companies, and that's, I think, a welcome return in investment style.
Right. And in terms of the value of biotech companies on the stock market, and I don't want to be too specific about you, but generally speaking, how are they performing in relation to the rest of the stocks on ASX at the moment?
Well, the ASX listed companies have actually performed very well. As an investment class, people would not have lost money if they had invested in biotech over the last 2 years. And I think that that's very pleasing to see. I think that as an investment class, companies are maturing. We will see a raft of new success stories building upon the successes of the last couple of years with new product approvals and so on, that I think will pique investors' interest again in the sector.
One of the comments that people often make about Australia is that there's too many companies on ASX, that they come onto a market too soon. Is that a valid criticism?
I don't know that it's necessarily a criticism. It's a valid statement.
It's a valid observation.
It's a valid observation. Australian companies do list early, much more earlier than their counterparts in Europe or the US. And there's a really good reason for that. And Australians like to take a punt. They invest in junior explorers in the mining sector, and for them, seeing a small biotech company looking to raise money to explore new avenues for the treatment of cancer or CNS diseases is actually a similar paradigm for them. So they're quite used to investing in that kind of situation. And I think that our VC investment groups are growing now. And so I think we're less likely to see companies listing early. But, you know, it's conventionally something that Australians have embraced, investing in junior explorers, whether they're in the mining sector or in biotech.
But for those junior explorers, aren't they? There's an expectation for those companies, more or less, to fail. Would that be correct?
Yes, there is an expectation that junior explorers in the mining sector, you know, there's risk attached to them.
Yeah.
I think investors are also familiar with that risk, and to some extent they don't see a difference in necessarily the risks that are inherent in investing in biotech, where you know, things may work, a good idea may work, or it may not. The thing is that when a good idea works, the returns are enormous.
It can be enormous, yeah. So, you know, just finally, in terms of innovation, the general state of the you know, reaching into the universities and the funding within universities, what's your view, and what's the Oz Biotech view of how the early stages, where the research and development stage occurs, where the innovation happens? What's the state there in Australia?
I think over the last couple of years we have seen less government commitment to funding early stage companies, funding spin-outs, and really setting the policy environment that would be helpful in that setting. Oz Biotech over the last couple of years has pushed really hard for a resetting of the priorities within government support for not only the biotech sector but other areas of the innovation economy. So we've really championed the R&D tax credit. It's pleasing to see that is now again before federal parliament in terms of the reading of the bills, and we'll be hoping that those bills get passed, because that R&D tax credit, that new legislation, offers some very significant benefits for companies that invest in R&D.
Yeah. Deborah Rathjen, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show.
Thank you.